Happy Monday, everybody. Glad to have you with us. Okay. This week's story follows on the heels of last week's story from Mark, Lillian, chapter 7. So Tom will tell us the story and then we'll talk about it some.
Right, and the story last week, just in case, was the story of Jesus' argument with the Pharisees about the dietary laws, and Jesus declaring all foods clean, and that what defiles a person is what comes out. So that's the prelude. This was a pretty big argument. So Jesus got up from there and he went to the region of Tyre. And he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he couldn't be hidden. But a woman whose daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit heard about him and came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth. And she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And Jesus said to her, "Let the children be fed first. It is not right to take the children's bread and feed it to the dogs." But she said, answering him, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And Jesus said to her, "For this saying, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." And she went home and she found her little girl in bed, and the demon was gone. Well, Jesus went then from the region of Tyre by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, to the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and who had an impediment in his speech, so that he was functionally mute. And they begged him to lay his hands on him. So Jesus took him aside privately, and he put his fingers into his ears, and he spit and touched his tongue. And he sighed deeply and said, "Ah, Ephatha." And immediately the man's ears were opened and his tongue was released and he spoke plainly. And they were all amazed. But he ordered them to tell no one about this. But the more he ordered them, the more they proclaimed it. And they said, "Ha! He's done all things well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak."
Thank you, Tom. That's
the story.
Yeah, that ends with a great note of celebration, really.
Oh, yeah.
Very joyful, very, very upbeat. Can use,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so what we really have is two stories here in one story this week. And let's talk about going back to the beginning. You said right before this particular section of the gospel, Jesus has been having a heated discussion with, I guess, and now was he in Galilee?
The major argument, yes.
Yeah, okay. So from there, then he went to Tyre. The region was Tyre a city? Where was Tyre in relation to where he'd been before with the Pharisees? And well, that's the first question.
Right. Well, Tyre was up on the coast, due west of the region of Caesarea Philippi and so on. And so Tyre is in Phoenicia, what is now Lebanon, and was a coastal city. So it was kind of a coastal resort. So people would go there, for the beach and for vacation.
Okay.
And then it was a port city, but it had beaches and stuff, and so it was a nice place.
All right. So was Jesus going there for a little rest and relaxation after his?
He was going there after this big fight that he had had with the Pharisees, and the implication is he's fed up with these discussions, and he's going to go take a break.
Yeah, he's always trying to get away from. He's always trying to take a break, and it doesn't never seem to work out much for him, does it? That never works.
Never works. He tries to get away.
So is that why? Is that why Mark says he didn't want anybody to know he was there? Because he just he just wanted. Okay, but yeah, so that didn't work. So this woman comes, and we have an interesting description of her. She's a Greek, a Syrophoenician. You mentioned she's a Gentile. I don't know. Is that
right? Well, that's in the translation. Greek is translated as a Gentile in the NRC.
Okay.
Which is appropriate.
Yeah. So why would Mark kind of highlight, be emphatic about who she was, what her background was?
Well, it was to identify her as an other, a non-Jew.
She wasn't part of Jesus's people.
Right. Basically, an enemy.
Yeah.
One who would be regarded as being on the other side.
And he sort of communicated some angst there when you said she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter, right?
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Well, and the implication is, when you think about it from the point of view of, and hear this as addressed to audiences that were primarily Jewish, they were recognizing what Mark is telling them. This woman was a Gentile, a Greek, Syrophoenician, and the Syrians were the worst oppressors of the people of Israel in the entire history of the domination of Israel by the nations. So they were worse than the Babylonians, than the Persians, than the Egyptians, even than the Romans. Under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, there was a major persecution and an effort to abolish the religion of Israel, and so that they would worship then the gods of Syria. And so one of the things that happened was that Antiochus IV Epiphanes forbid anybody to have copies of the scriptures, and he had show trials where he would force people to choose between either eating pork or dying. And the most graphic story of the martyrs of Israel was the story of a family of 7 boys and their mother, all of whom were given the choice of eating pork or being tortured to death. He tortured them. It's a horrible story in 2 Maccabees 7. So I'd suggest that everybody who wants to understand this story would read that story to know the background against which this story is told, and of the, for a woman, a Syrian woman, to come and ask him to cast the demon out of her daughter after what the Syrians had done to the children of Israel. Major diplomatic,
So there'd be no sympathy with her, for her in the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
And we don't, if you don't know that background and don't have those memories in your head, you really don't understand the story. And that's probably why I've heard this story told and explained that, oh, Jesus, this woman was such a strong personality that
she was going to teach Jesus how to be compassionate.
Right. So that's really not what was going on here at all, I guess. Yeah.
No,
Okay. So Jesus responds to her pretty harshly and very differently than the way he responded to Jairus, who also had a daughter who actually was very, very ill, near to death, and she died.
He even fell at his feet and begged him to, come and heal his daughter.
Yeah, and Jesus went.
Yeah,
right,
and
right
there was
away.
no critique,
right.
Put down the way that Jesus responds to this woman.
Right, but here he says, I'm not supposed to help you all. I'm supposed to, guess he compares her to dogs, right?
Yes.
I mean, that would even be an insult today, but how would
it was even more so in the ancient world? Dogs, very few dogs were, civilized. So, there were some, but basically they were hated because wild dogs were terrible. They'd attack people, they'd kill people.
Yeah, isn't there someplace, it seems like it's Old Testament, where somebody gets ripped apart by wild dogs, or they hope they will be.
Yeah, Psalm 22.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So why then did Jesus change his mind, as it appears to be the case?
Yeah.
He does. He decides he's going to help her out after all. Why is that?
Well, first of all, his response to her request is no. I won't. I'm not going to heal your daughter. It's not right to take the children's bread, the bread that was for the children of Israel, and give it to the dogs, that is, to the Gentiles. And so,
let me interrupt you a minute. What does he mean by bread? What's the bread?
Well, the bread is, the good things of life. It's, in this case, it would be
healing or daughter.
Healing. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jesus had healed the daughter of Jairus. That was the bread. And
we know from the story of earlier about Herod that all these things about Jesus healing had been the word's been spread around. So that's why she came, and she would have known.
Right. The word was spreading. It spread into Syria and Phoenicia about him, so that there was recognition of this new thing that was happening in Israel, in Gentile territory, among the Gentiles in Syria and Phoenicia and so on. So the word was spreading. And she heard about him and came and begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. So the reason for Jesus' change is that the woman is persistent, but she is also, I think, humble. She is not asking out of arrogance, out of an assumption that Gentiles deserve to have Jewish teachers heal their children. And instead she's saying, okay, yes, sir, I agree. we are dogs, but the dogs under the table will eat the children's crumbs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Jesus looks at her and recognizes that this is a woman who is begging, not out of arrogance, but out of deep love for her daughter, and is not asking him to do this out of arrogance, but rather out of need, out of a deep desire for healing for her daughter.
You know, another way to think about it might be she's not asking out of a sense of privilege. And we hear that that's become something that a concept that we're becoming more familiar with. That those, you know, in our country, in our nation, white people have been privileged, and there's been an expectation throughout history that, of course, you know, we get what we want from those who aren't so privileged, and now there's a sense of that's wrong, and that we need to make requests out of a sense of humility. Yeah.
And Jews had been oppressed by Gentiles for over 500 years. And now under the Romans, in the aftermath of the war, the oppression was worse than ever. So for Mark's listeners, you know, they would hear this as a story that was told, you know, to people who were oppressed by Gentiles.
Speaking of dogs, my dog just walked in the room.
Yeah.
Everyone's to close the door.
Story.
All right, thank you, Tippy, for that little entrance. Excuse me. All right, well, this story of the Syrophoenician woman ends on a very happy note. The demon is gone from the door. She goes home and she finds her little girl healed.
Right.
So it's
the demon gone.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful story. And then we move right into this next one, and we get a change of geography. Right. So,
but it's still Gentile territory.
It's even more so, isn't it? Near the Decapolis, or
the Decapolis were the 10 cities that were built by the remnants of Alexander the Great's army. They were Hellenistic cities. They were Greek cities on the west bank of on the east bank of the Jordan and of the Sea of Galilee. They were lined up on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So it was explicitly Gentile territory.
And so they bring to him this man who's deaf and mute, can't hear or speak. And there's wonderful description, which you really helped us visualize that with your gestures of Jesus putting his fingers in his ears and spitting and he touched his tongue. Jesus didn't touch his own tongue, right? He touched the man's tongue.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I mean, what's all that about?
Well, and another dimension of this is that he says this word in Aramaic that would have made no sense to the woman who didn't know Aramaic, or to the deaf man. But it was like a magic formula. And these actions of Jesus were, spittle was regarded as having therapeutic properties. And so it wasn't, I don't know, gross as we would think of it, but was rather a symbolic salve that had healing characteristics. But the sighing was the sighing of how much spiritual energy it took for him to heal this man.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a sigh. It's a deep sigh of energy, a prayer for this man to whom Jesus directs then his healing promise.
So he is successful. He heals the man, and then he tells everybody to be silent again, doesn't he?
Right. He orders them to be silent because he's trying to keep the story down.
Okay.
Because if the word gets back to the authorities, he's going to get arrested, And we know what happened when he got arrested. So he was trying to, keep the lid on the story of all the things that, and especially the story of what he was doing to Gentiles. So, it would get him in trouble if that was known among the Israelites on the other side of the sea.
Okay, what are the implications of this story for ministries of and work for peace and justice today?
Well, Jesus is here taking very explicit steps to do good for his enemies, to do good for those who were on the other side. So there had been warfare between the Syrians and the Israelites. And so the current situation in the Middle East is in some ways parallel to what was happening then, that Israel was surrounded by peoples from whom it was highly alienated. Now, there wasn't warfare going on. It wasn't, and Israel didn't have a strong military as they do now. But what Jesus was doing was he was actively promoting diplomacy by doing good for his enemies, for those on the other side.
And in the most simplest sense, he's going to them.
Right.
Yeah.
He was trying, significantly, he was trying to do it in secret. It's like secret diplomacy now. A lot of diplomacy happens not out in the open, but behind closed doors. That's where people can talk about things. So the implication of this now is that Jesus was pursuing peace, that he was actively doing things that were of positive benefit for Gentiles, and was then, as a Messiah, as a messianic figure, not killing his enemies, not organizing an army to destroy them, but was rather reaching out to them and was doing good for them, so that they were all delighted. They thought it was great, and we're all in favor of this. So the implication of this is that this is the way to peace, and that Jesus is showing by his actions the things that will lead to peace.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, well, our dog, Tom, is here breathing in my face, and I just figured out why. It is her dinner time. She wants some of those crumbs that are falling from the table. so we will sign off. I'm going to go feed the dog.
Get Tippy up. Everybody's got to be able to see her.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can make that happen. Come here, girl. Come here. All right, here we go. Oh, there she is.
There's Tippy.
Okay.
The dog under the table.
Everybody have a great week.
Have a great week indeed.
And do enjoy these two stories. They're wonderful celebrative stories.
Yep.
As well as teaching us to reach out to those that we might
Right.
we might consider not our favorite folks, and maybe even our enemies.
Right. And to tell the stories.
Yeah.
So that all these Gentiles were delighted at what he was doing. They were becoming, evangelists for this Jewish guy.
Yeah, they were. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.